Welcome to Hortube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do pretty much every Sunday of the month. The first Sunday of every month I do a subscriber photo video, or subscriber Sunday I call it. You can send in photos to this email address right here of things in your yard that you're proud of, and I include those, like I say, in the first Sunday of every month. So the first Sunday in September, I'll put up all the photos that I received during the month of August. The rest of the month I do question and answer videos on Sunday, and you can ask questions down below this video, and I will pick from those to answer the next week. There's a playlist that I'll link up here in the corner called Question and Answer Videos. There's a lot of them if you want to go back and watch any other question and answer videos that I've put up. In the past, let's see, there's a giveaway from plantsbymail.com that I announced a few days ago. If you go back and watch that video and then make a comment below that video for a chance to win one of the $100 gift cards. And then over on Instagram at Hortube, there's a photo from 3 or 4 days ago of me holding a plantsbymail.com box. You can make a comment below that photo, and that will enter you for a chance to win a second $100 gift card from Plants by Mail. The update video this week from the yard, I made quite a bit of progress. There's been a lot of propagation videos that I've put up recently, and I've got a lot of videos to go up this next week. So busy schedule on the channel coming up. What else do I have to talk about? Oh, the dog that you saw at the beginning. His name is Griffin. He is a very young rescue that is Holly's new friend. She's 12 years old. I get a lot of questions about her age. She's acted like a puppy though with Griffin. Griffin is his name. Griffin doesn't quite have the discipline to be out here during this video yet, and so he needs some work. You know, not destroying plants in the backyard, but I'll get there. But you'll see Griffin quite a bit in coming videos. So there's your introduction to him. I'm going to get started on the questions that I got from last week. We got some good questions. Let's see. Somebody asked me about blue foliage plants other than conifers. So, you know, not like a blue cedar of some kind or juniper. They want just foliage plants. Things that, you know, the things that come to mind for me are like agave, the beautiful blue agaves if you're in the southeast. There's sedums with blue foliage, of course, hosta. There's grasses like blue fescue that stay small, really beautiful blue hue to those. There's some native grass, blue stems that are being used more and more that I see here in the neighborhood. That's blue stem grass. I'm trying to think of what else. Fothergilla is a native shrub that has a blue hue to the foliage. I think if you go to a garden center several times during the year, you'll find a lot of things that actually have blue foliage. I had written some other things down. Let's see. There's definitely dianthus, perennial dianthus that has the blue foliage on it. Lavender. There's several lavender varieties that have blue foliage. Yuccas. There are euphorbias that have blue foliage. So I think you'll find quite a few things out there in the marketplace to get blue foliage without it being a conifer. Okay. Somebody asked me about the latest time to prune boxwoods or yews. Typically, you'll hear me talk about by late summer, I don't want to be doing any heavy pruning because the things will flush out and then, you know, potentially be damaged by an early frost. But in their case, they added in that they get a lot of heavy snow in the wintertime, and they're concerned that they'll splay open or crack or whatever because they're so heavily, you know, put on so much growth this year. I think you need to go ahead and prune in that case if you're worried, because the damage that would be done by the snow would be far more than a little bit of burn from an early frost or freeze on some new growth. So you have to weigh those things. There's a lot of those things in horticulture where we're weighing two negatives. A lot of things. I mean, as an example, at my nursery, all our cold sensitive things were in cold frames in the wintertime, and we had white plastic on top of them. If you keep the white plastic on too long in the spring, the plants start to grow, and then when you pull the white plastic off the house, that foliage gets burned by the sun because it hasn't been in any direct sun. Of course, if you pull the plastic off the greenhouse way too early, then you potentially get frost or freeze, late frost or freeze damage on the plant. So there's a lot of times you're weighing two negatives. And obviously in your case, the snow has the potential to kill the plants. A frost is just going to make them look unsightly temporarily. That's no big deal. Okay. Somebody asked me about planting a tree on a slope, and I need to have a video on my channel about planting on slopes. I've got some videos about ground cover junipers and that kind of thing. And I talked about in the ground cover juniper video, if let's say this is your slope, this angle right here, you just plant flush, you know, with any kind of ground cover. You just plant it like it's a flat space and plant the plant just, you know, right into the hill like that. Obviously, if you're planting a tree though, you need the tree to go up and down. I just back the back of the root ball right up against the bank. I don't want to bury that too much into the bank. I see people doing that sometimes. They'll create a ring further back into the bank. And of course, things are going to wash down that hill all the time, and you're going to end up burying the stem of your tree. So I dig a hole into the bank where just the back of the root ball will back up even to the soil, and the rest of the root ball is exposed on the front, and I have to pile soil up around it. But that's the way I do it. Like I say, I need to find a slope in this neighborhood and plant something on it so that I can, you know, I can show that a little better. But I definitely, like anything else, I don't want the root ball buried under soil. So the back of the root ball would just be even. You know, with the slope, the front of the root ball is going to stick up and have to be mounded, you know, some sort of mound built around it. Okay. Somebody asked me, their garden center says to use organic fertilizer spring and fall on their trees and shrubs and everything. And, you know, I've done videos for fertilizing the last 3 years, and I just fertilize once on my trees and shrubs and perennials in the late winter or early spring with an organic fertilizer, and that's it. I allow the mulch and everything else to feed them the rest of the time as that stuff breaks down. My annuals, baskets, pots, vegetable garden, I'll fertilize once or twice more during the season, but those shrubs and trees I only do once. But you're not going to harm them by fertilizing in the fall if you want to. The way organic fertilizers work is they feed the soil microbes, and then through just a natural process, those things feed your plants. Those things kind of go to sleep when it's cold outside. And so the organic fertilizer is just going to do nothing if it's already too cold. So you can do it. It's not going to hurt anything. I just don't think there's that much of a benefit to it either. So I just do it in the late winter, early spring at whatever amount the bag says on it that I buy during that year, and just a general plant fertilizer. But I do use organic fertilizers because they're good at not burning your plants, because they only work during the growing season, because when everything in the soil is active. That's the main reason I use organics. Okay, somebody asked me about putting a purple daydream loropetalum in a container. They're in zone 7B. Okay, so I'll answer this about what you should be selecting when you're looking for something that could go in a container and stay outside year round. Loropetalum's hardy in zone 7 to 10. If you're in zone 7 and you put it in a container and leave it above the ground, the pot's going to freeze solid at some point, and that's problematic because the roots on loropetalum are sensitive to root freezes. If you're putting something in container and you want it to be winter hardy, where you don't have to move the container, you need to find something that's one or two zones hardier than your area. So if you're in zone 7, I would not use a loropetalum because it's only hardy to zone 7. I have a video on my channel where I planted a loropetalum in a pot at the old house, but it was right up against the house. And so the house was going to offer it some protection. But in this case, in general, the answer would be find something that's one or two zones hardier than your area. So if you're in zone 7, if you can find something that's hardy in zone 5 especially, that's going to be ideal. The ideal thing to put in a container that can take a root freeze. So that's the answer to that. I would probably, if you do end up putting the loropetalum in a container in zone 7, you're going to have to winter protect it to keep it from freezing solid. Okay. Somebody put in a new Texas white red bud, and in the spring and now in the summertime, it's losing leaves and it looks weak and it's, you know, not that great. The way I go about this, I mean, I assume that things are going to be a little stressed the first year. I felt kind of lucky in this space because I don't really have anything stressed in this space. At the old house, the first couple years I was there, I'd plant things and they would struggle for a little while before they established themselves. Here, everything's kind of jumped pretty quickly, so I'm happy with that. But the normal way things go is you put things in the ground and they don't just grow. They've got to root in. They go through some stresses. Maybe it's particularly hot that first summer or particularly dry or whatever. And I don't think you can judge things in that first season. Now, what you do need to do if plants under stress is make sure you didn't plant it too deep. make sure that space isn't staying abnormally wet. Like maybe you didn't think it stayed wet and turns out it's wet all the time. Make sure you didn't bury it in mulch. You know, you don't bury the stems of the plant in mulch. And if those things are okay, then just assume that it's first year plant stress and next spring it'll probably leaf out and be fine. But don't stress about it. Do go and check that you planted it properly and that you can see kind of the top of the root ball. If it was a grafted red bud, make sure you didn't bury the graft in mulch, that kind of thing. Okay. Somebody asked me about the black nursery containers being too hot and burning the roots on plants, and they do. The reason we use black nursery containers and dark colored nursery containers is because it extends the season in the nursery business. It allows the roots to wake up a little earlier in the spring and get started growing, and of course then it extends the fall season as well. But they can, if one's just sitting out in the open and the sun's blasting it all day, it can burn the roots right on the edge of the container, and it does burn the roots right on the edge of the container. All the things I'm waiting to plant in this yard are at the top of my driveway over here, and they're all spaced about 12 inches apart. And that spacing allows the sun to get down into the bottom of the plants, so they're not too close together, they're not stretching, but it also allows those pots to not be blasted by full-on sun. So that's the way I go about that. But you do want to put some space between your plants, but make sure that the pots aren't completely exposed to the sun all the time, because it will damage, you know, their roots in peak summer for sure. Okay, somebody asked me about shading cuttings during propagation. My little greenhouse back here has a 40% shade cloth on it. I've shown it a couple times. You do want to shade cuttings when you're propagating them. That means they can go under your deck, or they can go in a greenhouse. They can go under some sort of shade cloth like I'm using. And you can order those shade cloths online. You can just type in nursery shade cloth into Google, and lots of companies will come up. You can order the size you want. You can order the shade percentage that you want. The shade cloth I'm using is a 40% shade cloth. It means it blocks 40% of the sun. Obviously there's 60% and 70% and so on and so forth. I use a 40% shade cloth. I have a very large shade cloth that I store in that shed over there that I use for frost protection. They have a lot of uses, and they're just great. And you can order them with grommets along the edge so that you can attach it to whatever you need to attach it to. And I always tell them, don't be cheap with the grommets. I want the grommets about 12 inches apart, not 24 inches apart. But the shade cloth has a lot of different uses other than shading propagation. I use them in the late winter for frost protection. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked me about how to get rid of bamboo, and somebody answered the question below it with the perfect answer, which is, you know, just tenacity. You have to, these noxious weeds, which bamboo is definitely a noxious weed once it gets established. I've got all kinds of noxious weeds coming up around this fence. You know, if you followed this channel, you know how, you know, out of control this space was, and I'm just constantly digging them back out. I'm just constantly, I mean, it's going to take a year, maybe 2 years, but I will win the battle. You just have to recognize that you can't cure some problems instantly in the landscape. They're going to take a while. And so with the bamboo, every single time it pokes its head up, chop it off. Don't let it get reestablished 3 or 4 feet tall in between. Otherwise, that just feeds energy back into those roots and kind of restarts the whole thing. So once a month or so, just go chop it off, and you will win the battle, but it may take you 2 years. That's the way that works. Somebody asked me about wood mulch being better. Is wood mulch better than pine straw for moisture retention? And definitely it is. But I rotate pine straw in my yard about every 3rd time I mulch. And the reason for that is because of my clay-based soils. This hardwood mulch builds up over time. It can actually start keeping things too wet. And so about every 3rd or 4th time I mulch, I use pine straw because it does breathe better, dries out better, and I let that hardwood mulch break down a little bit. If I had well-draining soils, a sandy soil, I would use hardwood mulch all the time because I'm trying to hold water in place. I'm struggling to hold water in place. But for me, I mean, heck, it's rained several inches during this week, and you know, the soil doesn't drain particularly well in between those rains when you're getting daily thunderstorms like I'm getting right now. So this hardwood mulch will eventually be problematic if I just kept piling it up and piling it up and piling it up. So the answer is yes, hardwood mulch is better at holding moisture than pine straw, but if you have clay-based soils, I actually like to rotate pine straw occasionally to break all that organic material, allow all that organic material to break down and not keep the area too wet. Okay, another long answer from Jim. Somebody asked what zone I'm in, and I'm in zone 7B in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm probably in zone 8 because I'm in an urban part of the city. It's an asphalt jungle where I'm at, so I'm assuming I'm actually in zone 8. I moved 30 minutes north. The old house was 30 minutes south of here. It was definitely colder there at night than it is here, even though it was south of here, because the city's holding more heat in. And last question for this week. Somebody asked me about ants. If they have ants in a planting area, should they worry about them and get rid of them? And unless they're, I don't worry about ants at all. Ants are very low, except for fire ants. They're very low on my list. And we made a huge mistake with fire ants when fire ants were first. Fire ants have slowly made their way from the Gulf of Mexico up to, they're probably in Virginia and Maryland now. I have no idea how far north they've actually gone at this point, but they constantly move the line where fire ants, the fire ant quarantine area works. See, I'm in the fire ant quarantine area, and for a nurseryman here, we actually have to treat the soil in the pots to send them to places that aren't in the fire ant quarantine area. So, and it's, you actually have to send a letter with it saying that you've treated the pots to prevent fire ants from spreading further north. They're going to spread further north anyway. That's not a secret. They're going to go as far north as they can go. As cold as they can tolerate, they're going to go. We made a mistake with fire ants where we have used chemicals over entire yards for 3 fire ant mounds, and we killed all of the native ants and the other things that might have competed well with those fire ants. And so, unless it's a fire ant mound, leave it be. Or they're coming in your house, and obviously you're going to defend your house. But no, I don't worry about them at all. You can end up with a situation though where you have ant hill that's right up against the base of a plant, and they can do so much tunneling around the plant that they can start keeping it overly wet. And at that point, I'll just take a water hose over there and just kind of drown the space, and that usually will just get them to move on. They'll find it's not a place that they just want to be. Or you can kill the mound at that point. Well, your choice, but they can create situations around certain plants where the plant all of a sudden looks extremely dry and it's wilting, and that's because they created so much tunneling around it that they've dried the plant out. So that's it. Anyway, ask questions down below this video, and I think next week will be another question and answer, and I think maybe 1 week after that will be the beginning of September for the subscriber Sunday video. Thanks for watching.